partners include the Alaska Sea Grant Office, the Cordova chapter of the Audubon Society, and the Forest Service. Next week's speaker is actually going to be me. I'm going to be talking about wild plants of Cordova, and particularly how to identify them in the spring when they're first coming up and they don't look anything like the pictures in the field guide, but that's the best time to eat them. So, and this week, leading in, we have the status of subsistence in Cordova. So welcome, Hannah.
Hello, my name is Hannah Johnson. I'm with the Division of Subsistence, and we're in the Department of Fish and Game. I'm here with my colleague, Joshua Ream. He's going to be taking notes and maybe provide some feedback if you guys have some questions. So even though I'm sitting up here and I'm going to be talking to you, and you're probably going to be a little bored, and you're going to think you're at a presentation, you're not. This is actually a data review session, so it's really kind of an open dialogue with people who know their resources the best, which are residents of Cordova. So we really want to get feedback on this data, anything that looks abnormal, anything that looks off. One important thing to note about this is even though we're Division of Subsistence, the numbers and the data you're going to be seeing here tonight is for all wild resource use in the home. So anyway, if you're getting it on your sports license, if you're getting it on your personal use, it doesn't matter. It all goes into here. We're interested in what people are using in their home, how they're accessing it, and if they're getting enough.
Do you want me to hit the lights, Hannah, or leave them on?
Oh, I forgot to take out the transition.
Maybe one? Turn one off?
Cordova. There we go. So just a little bit about our division. The Division of Subsistence is really unique in wildlife management across the United States. We're a small division made up of social scientists, mainly anthropologists, and we provide data on seasonality of fishing, hunting, gathering, methods of harvesting and processing, sharing of wild foods, areas of harvest, and use through mapping, cultural significance, social significance, economic significance. So we're looking at all of that data, but we're looking at it based on what people are telling us directly. So I'm not like crunching, I mean, I guess we do crunch the numbers and stuff, but I'm not just pulling these out of reports and things like that. This is what people in the community are telling us. And so that's basically the purpose of our research and what we're constitutionally mandated to do by the state of Alaska. Oh man. So this project that we were here last spring about this time of year, and we were asking about 2014. So this data is really just a little sliver. It's one harvest year. So sometimes there's a bad fishing year, and so the numbers look low, and then we put all that context in our report. We say, you know, even though this was the total fish harvest, it was actually very low this year because a flood came and took out all of, you know, the breeding area or stuff like that, and all of the fish eggs. So the other communities that were participating in this study were Titlik and Chenega Bay down here in the quarter. We were funded through EVOS. They're mandated to do these studies every 10 years. We did ask some specific EVOS questions that were based on the surveys that were done back in 1990, right after the spill. And that is asking specifically about seal populations, seabird populations, herring populations, and shellfish populations. So just really quickly, some of the basic demographics. We look at census data and all of that kind of stuff, and sometimes boroughs have that information, but we also do our own population and household estimates. So for the population, ours is a little bit higher than the census, and we do have different criteria. The census, you have to live in a place for at least 6 months out of the year. Our criteria is you have to live in the community at least 3 months out of the year, and you have to consider it your home. And that's really to get a lot of students and younger people who leave town for school and then are back for the summer. So our total I'm sorry, that was the population. Let me actually go back to this last slide. Well, I can't go back to it, but that 950 number was households. So all the surveys that we do are based on households. So if I was to survey you, I would ask you about what you got, and then the rest of the people in your household got. So 950 were the estimated number of households out of a population of 2,602. And we wanted a 20% sample. We were able to get 18.6, so we were pretty close to the amount of people that we wanted to interview. We can't interview the entire community of Cordova, it's much too big, so we do what they call a sample survey. Whereas in other communities, like in Cayuga Bay, we're able to do a consensus survey and actually interview all of the households because they have a lot lower household populations. So 23.8, that's the average length of residence of people that self-identified as the heads of households. And this number is interesting because for a long time, especially in a lot of fishing communities, you have really kind of transient community. You have people coming in for a couple years, then leaving, you have a really big outpouring of younger populations, and that happens across Alaska. And you're really kind of seeing that stabilize, and you're seeing this change where you're seeing more and more people that are born and that are staying here in Alaska as opposed to people that are coming from out of state. The per capita total weight of usable harvest pounds of wild resources was 116.4 pounds, and that includes everything. So they take the total poundage of all the resources, and then they divide it by the number of people, and that's how we get that number. 10.4 is the average, let me just look at this. 10.4 is the average number of resources harvested per household. So each household is on average harvesting 10 different types of resources. So that could be like silver, sockeye, king salmon, blueberries, blackberries, and so forth. And so that's a pretty high diverse number. When you look at more urban areas like Anchorage and stuff, it's like 3. So it's quite a bit higher. I already kind of went a little bit over this. So this was our sample characteristics. You can see how the data shaped out. We were able to interview 184 households. We actually interviewed a few more, but a few of the surveys we weren't able to use because of discrepancies in the collection process. There was a 19.4% out of the desired 20%, but it was still enough to make it a statistically significant study. This is just some basic demographic data, some of the kind of stuff that we're looking at for trends and patterns that are important. And this is location of birth based on entire population. So the one we saw before with the 23 years, that was a household head, but this is for the entire population. So majority of people are born here in Cordova, not here exactly, but the parents are living here. They're born, in Anchorage or wherever. But you still have a really large percentage coming from out of the in other places in the U.S., about 48%, 49%. Just really quickly, some income data that we collect. You can see, which I'm sure is no surprise to anybody here, this is not forestry or agriculture, this is fishing in this pie graph here, followed by local and tribal government. So that's your local governments that you have here in the community. This was the total pound number of harvested wild food, over 300,000 pounds, which is pretty significant, but it is a pretty large community here. So it looks bigger, like you see other communities that only get 50,000 pounds, but they have a lot smaller population. Again, 116 is the per capita. 6.7 is the average number of resources harvested. So that 10.4 is used, and the reason you have that discrepancy is because people are sharing. So you might have only harvested 6.7 resources, but your neighbor gave you some of this, and your friend gave you some of that. So the average number of households are using that 10.4 number. Then if we look down here, we have some interesting stuff. 98% of households participated in some type of wild resource food gathering, whether that's harvesting, attempt to harvest. Yeah, that's 94%. So this is actually used. 98% is used. So 98% of households are using some type of wild resource. 94% is attempting to harvest. And those are pretty high numbers when you look at other communities across the state. So this is breaking it down into participation and processing. A lot of times, not that many people are going to go out and hunt a moose, but a lot of people will be involved in the processing of that. So you see a lot of discrepancies a lot of times in large land mammals, in fishing. A lot of people are cleaning their own catch, so they're involved in that. You'll notice that marine mammals we have 0, and that's only because we were not able to interview anybody who hunted marine mammals. There was marine mammal use in 2014, and we include that in the context of the report because the Marine Mammals Commission gets those numbers. So that is included, but for the purpose of our chart, it sits at 0. And it could also just be like 0.02, so it would still show up as 0. This shows us success rates. So again, a lot of times you see the most dramatic here in large land mammals. We have 79% of people going out attempting to harvest and only 33% successfully harvesting. So this can show you a lot about how easy people are able to access these resources that are actually going out and trying to harvest them. The only one that has increased since the last time that we did this study in 2003 is vegetation, which we have really high, and this is pretty common in a lot of communities, is vegetation. You have a lot of harvest rate, a lot of attempt rate, and a lot of use rate. So you see that reflected there also. And you'll notice down here for the marine mammals, we have a use rate because people that we interviewed didn't harvest the animal, but someone shared it with them, so that gets reported. And now this is all by poundage. So these are the top 10 harvested resources by pounds. Wood is excluded from this, even though it's in its own like separate house heating section. So wood usually makes the list, but we've excluded it. Sockeye salmon, number 1, followed by king salmon. Halibut always has a big showing just because, you know, they're very big fish and they have pretty high limits. And then berries. So this is a lot of berries, and this is by poundage that people are collecting. King salmon, deer, low bush cranberries, all that kind of stuff. And here is how those broader categories, not breaking out into specific species, break down. So again, we see salmon by pound makes up the majority of the harvest out of that total weight down here. Non-salmon fish, and again, that's mostly halibut. Large land mammals always make up a big chunk, and that's moose really that's driving those numbers up pretty quickly, followed by vegetation, marine invertebrates. Small land mammals is a little bit different here because people report their individual land mammals or small land mammals, but we only record people that are actually using the meat. So most of those small land mammals don't get recorded in this usable weight because they're just used for pelts. They're people that are trapping and they're not using the meat, they're just using the fur. So now we're getting into some of our mapping data. This is for all of the resources. So again, not everybody chooses to map, and this is only people we interview. So if you're like, you know what, I know I went right there and it's not on there. If we didn't interview you, or if you didn't map, or we didn't talk to someone who went with you, it might not show up on this. But these are just kind of an overview of areas of people that are accessing resources, and this is all of those resources combined. But we'll break them out by category in a second. So this is how the salmon composition is breaking down: 43% sockeye, 36% coho, and this is mostly through that sports fishery, followed by king salmon and other, which is pink salmon and I think a couple of dog salmon that people got in different areas. Okay, this is something we were actually just struggling with before we came. So as you can see, removal from commercial catch makes up a really big component of the sockeye harvest, as I think a lot of people probably expected to see. The same with most of the king salmon harvest. What we were wondering about is the subsistence set net. Is there anywhere in Prince William Sound where you can set net for subsistence? Does anybody know? Do you think
well,
that?
that's only for commercial.
No, you can use a set gill net for subsistence.
Like you're probably gonna catch pinks.
Okay, so what I'm thinking happened.
You should, yeah.
I'm pretty sure people were considering the subsistence gill netting out.
Yeah, that's what we assume. That's what we think. On the, it just says subsistence set net, and there's no subsistence like gill net or drift net. So I think that just got filled in instead. So this probably should be drift gill net. Does that seem right to people, or
Yeah.
if we make that change? Okay.
It would seem crazy if it wasn't.
Wouldn't it? Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I think, because that's the only subsistence net we have on the actual survey, and if it's drift gill net, you're supposed to fill it in individually, but sometimes people are just like, oh, subsistence net, and check that off and don't.
Well, the subsistence permit has a checkbox for set net, drift net, or seine,
Yeah,
so,
but you can seine, right? Somewhere, because there's also, this is seine over here.
Yes.
Okay. And the other interesting thing about this is this coho is coming almost, like I said, is coming from that sports fishery, that rod and reel. And it could, I guess, also be on the subsistence with rod and reel too, in Ibeck Creek and in that area over there. And so this is, oh, and I should preface that, so in that poundage, we do include removal from commercial catch, but not in our mapping. We don't map where people commercially fish, because otherwise it would just be like the whole district would be, you know, blurred out. So all of this is either sports or subsistence, or I guess there's no personal use. So it's one of those two that's showing up in here. And nobody goes up to Chitna usually, it looks like. Or
Why
goes up
shouldn't
the
we?
Copper Basin.
Yeah, why should we have to?
Yeah, but we know like some people talk about going up there to moose hunt and stuff like that, or to visit family, and it just says it didn't show up on the map. We were just curious about that.
so with that, I'm sorry, you maybe already explained this, but why is there the zigzag line?
It's just poor mapping skills. So this is somebody that was just going out of town, and obviously they didn't go that high up the river delta, and were setting their net out as they were going. They were drifting the full way.
No,
Drift.
impossible.
We checked like with 3 people, and that's what they are convinced that this person said they drift gill netted.
That little
Out to the
notch
bay.
up into the Copper River, there's nobody drifting up into that.
But they could go from here, and I don't know if they're doing it the whole way, but I think
No
this
way.
was their destination point, and so they were going out there to harvest stuff.
Have you read the regulations for commercial fishing?
This wouldn't be commercial. This would be a subsistence user.
Well, when they go commercial fishing, they do subsistence fish too.
But
Yeah.
But you can only subsistence fish where the commercial period's open.
Right. Okay, so we think this is wrong,
Yeah,
probably. But this person could have maybe trolled out there.
no.
That's not an airplane.
You think so?
That's
I
a
think
new
what
way of
happened is
fishing.
somebody said, oh, I fish all along this area out
Yeah.
to Controller Bay, and then that's what got mapped,
Yeah.
like that. Okay.
So,
Okay.
so basically these maps are a compilation of what individuals put on there, and it's not really any kind of weighting. So like
Yeah.
if 5 people did a circle in one spot, there's no consideration for the fact that that's, or 50 people
Yeah,
do a circle in
exactly.
that same spot
Exactly.
versus it's one
So this could have
person
been
that is
20
like that.
people, this could have been 1 person. And we do that intentionally because, and this is all search area. So this person reported not catching any fish when they did that. And so this is all search area. It isn't actual harvest area. And they do that because otherwise it's basically like showing, especially with large land mammals and stuff, like, oh my God, people got 90 moose here. I'm going to go moose hunt there next time. So that's why we don't show concentration, and that's why we don't show successful versus
Right.
unsuccessful. I mean, the main issue with, so the main thing with these maps is so when they do this study now, 10 years from now, they can look like, oh my gosh, nobody ever goes over here anymore. What happened? All the fish are gone from there, something like that. Or if they're a bigger issue that these have been used for before, is they try to close a section. And you go, actually, you know, 90% of our community is harvesting fish in that area. And so if you close that, it's actually going to have a really big impact on us.
I think there might be some ways to map that a little differently that maybe I'll just talk to you about afterwards that might get you to the same place, but, yeah, I'll just.
Okay. Yeah, that would, any input you have would be really great with that. Okay, so now we're moving on to non-salmon fish. So halibut dominates this pie chart, as you can see. This other fish is a few kind of random marine fish, but also a few freshwater fish too that are harvested around here. And this is the total, and I have down here, just so you guys know, the total weight, or the total weight of each graph. So halibut is mostly long line. There is some removal from commercial catch, which is pretty minute. And then people fishing from boats. But it really, as you can really see the next most commonly caught fish is that rockfish, which is very insignificant compared to the amount of halibut that people are using. And so this is a similar map for the non-salmon fish. And you'll see that if, some people travel and they go around and stuff like that, and so you'll have these little breakout boxes. And again, we're not specifying species and we're not specifying concentration or anything like that.
Where is that breakout box?
It's just wrangle.
Wrangle. I don't know what they were fishing for there. But,
Everything we
It's
all.
just a bad inset.
yeah. I mean, the inset is showing like other areas where people found. Like, so sometimes there'll be like a Kenai one and stuff like that. We can't fit it all on the same map. So this is mostly people that travel and are visiting family, or they, go away for the summer or have a fish camp somewhere else or something like that.
So it's Hans Werner.
Do you think that's too specific? Because that's something else that we can change. Like if people are like, because this is supposed to all be anonymous, so if everybody can identify who that person is based on that incident.
There are a lot of people that
Okay.
spend a lot of time in wrangle.
We'll take that out.
What you gotta do is read the chart, use local knowledge.
I guess someone out of Wrangle's fishing Dungeness.
Well, this is not, that wouldn't be included in this one. That'd be in shellfish. So this is just other marine fish and freshwater fish.
Yeah. Trolls.
We're still working on our mapping skills, as you can tell. We just moved from paper to iPads, which aren't as finger friendly. So there's a lot of like polygons and straight lines, because those are the options that it gives you. So we're trying to have like a draw feature, so things will look a little bit smoother. But again, it's just trying to give an idea of areas. We don't need to have like specific spots where people are catching all their fish or anything like that mapped. So here we have large land mammals. Moose make up a really big portion of this. That's followed by deer. And even though you see 472 deer up here, that's almost half the amount that was harvested in 2003, where they harvested over 900 deer. So there was a lot lower deer harvest. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Some people talked about, they thought that the deer were hurting. It seemed like their populations were down. That really intensive snow year took out a lot of the deer. And so people weren't harvesting their limit. They were harvesting less because they wanted to protect that population. They were also a little bit more difficult to find. And so those were kind of the big reasons for that. But then the other reason that actually I guess I should have said at the beginning of this survey is that our previous surveys have been stratified, where 100 of the households have been Native Village of EAC members and 100 haven't been. And this time we didn't stratify our sample, so we only got like 20% of Native Village of EAC members. And traditionally across the state of Alaska, Alaska Native groups harvest higher amounts than non-Alaska Native groups. So that's another reason why you see a decreased numbers across the categories.
So I have a question real quick. Is this in a calendar year or a regulatory year?
Calendar year.
Okay, so this data is for the fall of 2014.
Yeah,
Okay.
which makes it's very hard with the trappers to do that. Okay, so this is another issue that we're struggling with. Is this moose search area? Could somebody have maybe like thought, oh, I'll go look and see if there's moose over on
I've heard that there's 1 or 2 moose on Hinchinbrook Island.
But
So maybe this is that guy, he's out
nobody's-
there and he's gonna get it.
Nobody's looking for him there.
No,
I
okay.
don't think there's a
And
lot of
if-
people.
The only place on Hinchinbrook we've ever had reported moose harvest is at Boswell Bay.
Very far
So
eastern.
if they were,
Not like up in the
it wouldn't be
mountains.
that whole central portion of
No.
Okay.
Hinchinbrook.
And that was a subsistence use, right?
Yeah.
I would guess somebody actually was marking for deer there or something. That's pretty-
Yeah, and it
Oh,
just
there is
got
a deer, yeah.
the wrong category. Because this
I
is
would
the deer,
guess.
the stripe is the deer search area, so that could very well, it just,
Yeah, they're all over both those islands.
yeah, and so I'm sorry, to answer your question, so it's subsistence or sports. It doesn't matter which regulation you got it under.
You go hungry.
So is that map saying that people are not looking for deer anywhere besides Hawkins and Hinchinbrook?
Yes.
Cordova residents.
Cordova residents, and again, that's not saying that that's not true, but out of everybody that we talked to, this was the area that they reported. Some people don't like mapping, especially a lot of like, some hunters, you know, they go to the same area all the time, they don't want people to even know where its general whereabouts are. So it could have been that it wasn't mapped, or it could have been we just didn't interview anybody who went anywhere else. So there was, you know, 750 households we didn't talk to.
Well, Montague has a lot less deer hunting
Down here.
pressure, yeah, than years past.
Well, and we thought about that too, but people were saying that, you know, there's a lot of deer on those first two islands, and to get out all the way to Montague is a bit of an ordeal. And so if you are going to deer hunt, it was like you might as well just go to those two islands instead of, you know, kind of going all the way up. Exactly.
They're the two islands we believe have the highest deer density, so, and they're closest.
Yeah.
Those are the highest,
And the other thing with moose is I thought people were saying that they went like all the way back here on airboats looking for moose. But is that not true?
Is there like that?
Ibex right there, that little blue
Looking
thing.
for moose?
Yeah.
So that's up
That looks a little too
at
far.
Sheridan?
glacier.
Is that
Like just up in these like flat area.
There's people that hunt up Ibex, for sure.
No.
Or is that a
Or
goat
can you
camp
not go
road?
up those?
That might be
rivers?
Goat Camp Road. Is it on the east side of Sheridan Sherman Glaciers?
I don't understand what you're asking about, because the crosshatch there is for mountain goat, right? The crosshatch that you were gesturing to up in the sky, in the,
Um,
that key's for mountain.
Yeah, exactly. And that, I mean, not up in the mountains, but in these flat like areas here and up here, I thought people were saying they go up the river deltas to look for moose.
But they didn't map it?
They might not have just mapped it. That could have been the issue.
There's very few up in that
Well,
area though.
So people
You
would
can do all
have.
kinds of crazy things, but if I was looking for this.
Most of the moose harvest and searching for moose would paint the entire West Copper River Delta green south of the highway. And a little bit north, but not very far north. That's where most of the moose are, and it's where most of the harvest takes
Go
place.
south. Okay.
And I'm talking the West Copper River Delta, the west side of the Copper River.
On
That's down
National
here?
Yeah,
Forest
so-
Service lands.
All that ground south of the highway, you know, a very wide area is used for searching for moose and taking moose.
Okay.
That area along the road though, that appears to be in the Copper River, that's Milo's spot, so I know people.
I don't think we interviewed him though, actually.
I can show you exactly.
Oh, now you did.
Yeah, now we know.
It's interesting that the survey didn't pick up more in the Martin River.
Yeah,
But there's not a lot.
Yeah, that one valley.
No.
and in the last few years.
It's hard to get to.
In the last few years.
And the scale is like not particularly good, and I think this road overlay is actually over the
The
yellow.
Martin.
So I don't know if that.
Yeah.
Okay, but is this too specific? Should we take that
I don't
off?
know. I wouldn't think so.
No? Okay.
That's where everybody looks for moose.
So again, like I said, this is individuals. The total poundage that was used for eating in households for small land mammals was 922. So it was less than 1%. So it shows up very small. But if you're looking at it just individuals taken, this is how it breaks out. And the snowshoe hare were consumed most frequently, few beavers, but most everything else was just taken for fur content by trappers. Oops. And this is the map we have for small land mammals. So now going on to marine invertebrates. This tanner crab made up the vast abundance, but
There's only one kind of tanner crab.
well, this is the snow crab, I think, which is actually a type of tanner crab.
Yeah.
But it's not the tanner
There's
crab that was
Paradise
here
and
before the
there's
oil
Opie.
spill. It's a different
But
type.
Opie, we don't have Opies around here.
Yeah. And so that's what made up a big chunk of it, followed by king crab. Razor clams were not, I think we can look at the map next, but I'm pretty sure they weren't harvested around here.
100 years ago they were.
Yeah, I know. I found this photo in a Come to Cordova postcard. That's how big you could have got your razor clams back then. And then shrimp as well. A lot of people participating in the shrimp. Shrimp fisheries. And as you can see, you know, that it's pretty all over. People went all over the sound to get their shellfish. Bird harvest, again, you know, it looks like the pie looks really elaborate, but it's a little less than 4,000 pounds of total weight compared to like when we were looking at non-salmon fish, that was 46,000 pounds. So it's quite a bit less. Mallards were the most readily identified. Cranes were really popular. A lot of people said they really enjoyed cranes. Here's our search area for birds. So we just break it out by bird egg and then ducking geese. And then upland game birds, which are the ptarmigan and the grouse. So for vegetation, berries, and this is, you know, how it is usually shakes down, made up a huge percentage. But people also talked about it really being a bumper crop that year and that it was just a really good berry year. Seaweeds is only consumed seaweed, not seaweed that people are taking for fertilizer. We only include consumed seaweed. And then other plants and greens and mushrooms.
Could we see the map of the favorite lagoon berry spots?
Yeah.
Oh.
That 48% one?
People are very vague with the berry. They're like, by the road. Okay. You know, a lot of just the road.
I have a question about your total weights. Are those are the actual recorded weights, or are those your extrapolated weights for the?
They're expanded. They're expanded for the whole community. So we only get that small sample, and then they take that per capita of what it would be for the whole community, and that's how they get the expanded weight. So that's why you get those.
So you're estimating.
Yeah.
That the town of Cordova harvests 27.
Yeah. So the assumption
pounds of
is
berries.
within that 200 households, we got enough variation. We've got enough people that harvest a lot, enough people that didn't harvest at all to give us that overall picture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes that doesn't work out. I've been in communities where we've done this and everyone's like, you gotta talk to these 8 people. They get most of the food for the whole community and they don't make it into our random sample. We don't get to choose which households we go to. It's all totally random done. So what we do in that case is we just have to really explain it in the text and be like, you know, this is, like, these numbers look low, but this isn't what people say we're actually doing. You know, they said that these guys were really high harvesters and that our numbers were misrepresented because of that.
So with berries, I don't think most people think about berries in terms of pounds. They think about berries in terms of gallons. You have to do a.
They have conversion, yeah. We have an IM, an information management department that has conversion factors for everything. And like for the fish, they'll look at what the average weights were reported for the Copper River and for sockeye and for kings and stuff like that. And so they get really regionally specific. And then they have like, you can put down like trash bag and they have a conversion for that, or a couple of handfuls and they have a conversion for that. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, and we try to be as specific as possible when we're asking
Yeah.
the survey. Okay, you said trash bag, is that 6 gallons, 5 gallons?
You have
Black or white.
you have a green line on the outer coast of Montague there? Am I seeing that correctly?
That's probably
Yeah.
seaweed.
But who gets there?
Well, and the thing also with a lot of the
Not
plants and
even
berries is that people aren't necessarily going out there for plants and berries. They're going out for something else, and they happen to be harvesting those along the way.
But you know, the whole north coast of Montague is inaccessible.
Yeah, there's almost no way to get there with, you know, there's surf, so you can't get there from a boat. It's rocky, so you can't land a plane. It's suspicious. That's something I'd question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your berries.
I know it's too bad 'cause this is like that's the nicest looking harvest search area in all of our maps, but So then we asked people about how this year was compared to past years. Did you get less, the same, or more? And also, a lot of people were just like, I never used that resource, so they wouldn't be considered into that category. So vegetation, a lot of people were saying that they got the same of. A lot of people were saying that they got more of. The same with salmon. Most people were saying the same. Some of the lower ones, large game mammals, a lot of people talked about, getting less moose, getting less deer. Marine mammals, other things, yeah. We also asked food security questions. These are questions that are asked across the United States, with a few tailored ones specifically towards Alaska, because most states don't have access to wild resources like we do here. And Cordova, there we go, ranked higher in food security than the average of Alaska and then the average of the United States, which was,
This is perceived food security?
yeah, perceived food security. So we asked people, like, is there any time last year where you had to forgo a meal or something like that, or if you needed more food but you couldn't access more food? So some people characterize it like, well, I needed more of this, but the barge couldn't come in, and something like that, but they don't consider that when they're considering food security. So Cordova and other communities that were impacted by the Exxon Valdez spill is a little bit unique because we have this really extensive amount of data. Most communities, it takes us, 15 years sometimes. We just did the Copper Basin again. The last time we did that was in '87. It's really dependent on funding. We have to get our own grants. We have to get our own funding to go out into the field. And so Cordova is really unique in that we have this really kind of rich history of data. And these are the per capita weights for each year. So you can see that it is a little bit down, but it's not, completely uncharacteristic. And then we'll look at the specific species that were down. And so some of the bigger ones were the salmon was down per capita for each household. Non-salmon fish, pretty much no freshwater fish. Like, there was very, very few freshwater fish. And if you looked at past studies, those numbers were higher. And then large land mammals also, or where you see some of those bigger declines.
All the sports fishermen died off.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, what was going on with non-salmon fish in 1988?
Well, this is at the year. So they did the interview for that year, the year after. And because of the oil spill, people were very concerned about their wild resources, and they were very concerned about having access to them. And so they were, maybe saying what they harvested with a kind of heavy heart. And yeah, it's hard to say. That year's a little bit of an anomaly, across the board, and it's probably because of the oil spill. People were pissed and people were upset about what was happening, and
So
were afraid that all their resources were going to disappear. And that you can see that year that does that kind of across the board here.
So does that non-salmon fish drive that greater number in the previous graphic for 1988?
It does, but it's and also herring is a really big part too. That kind of falls off. There was herring harvest and stuff like that last year, but not at those higher numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I should mention also, all of these reports are online if anybody's interested in getting that data. You can find it on our website.
It can be downloaded in Excel spreadsheets and manipulated and analyzed by
Yeah.
independent researchers.
And there's explanations of the conversions and things like that on there.
Well, you guys are the only ones that manipulate the numbers.
So this is just a little comparison to some of the other communities that were asking those EVOS specific questions to, and we did it for the 2014 year. These two communities were actually under an LNG study, so they weren't in that original scope of work that we saw at the beginning. But Cordova really kind of falls right in the middle of per capita resource harvesting. So now just talking about general comments. So we also put in the comments section, and these are the things that, we're hearing again and again and again as we're talking to people. So access, I think, was probably the biggest issue across the board, and people talking about needing more access to subsistence opportunities. To fish was a really big one, to salmon, but also access to federal hunts, to moose hunts and things like that. People felt if you didn't have the gear, if you don't have a boat, if you don't have an airboat, you have really, really limited access to subsistence resources. People also talked about a need to have separate openers for the commercial and sports fishermen. People felt that it restricts commercial fishermen's ability to subsist. A lot of fishermen said, you know, I'm paying myself for my fish. I'm not subsistence when I do home pack. And they also Subsistence talked about it impacting their success. A lot of
It
people.
depends on which definition of subsistence you use, too.
Yeah, in what context do you mean? Like what?
Well, there's two different versions. I mean, you got one that says custom and traditional, and the other one that says long-term or something that, or a long, I forget what the US definition is.
So, yeah, I don't know what version they're using. I'm assuming that they're using the customary and traditional, because I think that's what that fishery was founded on, a customary and traditional finding kind of thing. But the commercial fishermen that were commenting on this, and also it wasn't just commercial fishermen commenting on it, they felt that it wasn't participating in subsistence, taking from home pack. It was commercial fishing and then removing from your commercial catch, so basically taking money out of your pocket. And also a lot of people talked about needing greater enforcement. Upriver, people felt that fishery has okay regulations, but there's just zero enforcement of it. And there's a lot of kind of waste of fish, and that there's a lot of damage being done to the fishery down here is happening up there. Also about greater enforcement around here as well, people fishing from the beach. People mentioned like over by Hippie Cove and stuff like that people snag, and that there needs to be more enforcement in town as well, looking, not just going out and looking at those fisheries, but looking at the in-town fisheries as well, and especially Ibeck Creek, where a lot of non-local people, or I mean, I guess it's perceived that, I don't know if this how it is, but a lot of people saying that, you know, people are coming from out of town, they're catching tons and tons of silvers, they're filling up coolers and they're flying it out, and there's nobody there like checking tickets, making sure people qualify to fish in that fishery and that kind of stuff. So greater enforcement all around, people thought would be helpful. Sea otters, I would say probably like 60% of people we interviewed said that sea otters were a problem here and that they needed to be culled, and there needs to be some kind of management strategy to deal with the sea otters. They're seen as continuing to keep the shellfish fisheries depressed. People said that the tanner crabs, the clams, all of that stuff, it was wiped out by the Exxon Valdez oil spill, but they haven't been able to recover because of the constant pressure of the sea otters. People talked about wanting more information on the research that's being done around here on shellfish safety. A lot of people worry about eating some shellfish, that there can still be contaminated. People talked about going to some beaches and they can still find oil under the rocks, and if that's still impacting the shellfish. About what's continuing to impact the herring and also continuing to impact the tanner crab, and to have more research done in there and see when and if there can be a viable tanner crab commercial fishery. People also talked about just focusing more money towards herring studies so that they can determine why herring haven't recovered in Prince William Sound area, and so that for the end goal of opening a herring fishery again. A lot of people talked about how it was a really important part of the economy here, and it, you know, basically almost gave you year-round employment as a commercial fisherman, and it really impacted a lot of people when that fishery disappeared. And then another concern that a lot of people talked about was just cost of living. People felt that cost of living was really hard here. Energy was expensive, owning property is expensive, taxes are expensive, food is expensive, and that's kind of coupled with this limited economic opportunity. It's hard to find year-time work. The fisheries still haven't recovered, which they felt was still kind of adding to the depressed economy, and it's difficult to enter the fishery if you're not already involved in it, if you're like a young person trying to start in the fishery, as it being difficult to do that here.
Not difficult, impossible.
Impossible. So does anybody have any additional comments that they think are kind of community-wide issues that weren't mentioned, that should be included in the report? Again, this is just 2014, so you can see these comments really change. You know, on a low moose year, all the comments are the moose were bad, or on a low deer year, it's the same thing. And then a couple years later, the moose are fine, and it's recovered. So, no? Any questions?
On your bird graph, you had a area of harvest north of Hinchinbrook entrance up in the tanker lanes. That'd be kind of suspicious.
The birds?
Okay.
Actually, it's in the middle of the sound, if I remember right.
What's the graphic, Bob? You talking about birds?
It was, yeah. It was
Here, let me go back.
It was a bird subsistence, and it was north Hinchinbrook entrance up in the middle of the tanker lanes.
That's where we get our common mirrors.
Crap.
Well, people do hunt seabirds from the boat, but people just aren't out there in their boats out there.
Most of those natives are dead.
Oh. This might take forever, but okay, I'll,
No, you are, you're there.
oh, perfect. So this guy right here?
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
a strange one.
Okay.
What's that, ducks and goose?
I mean, it could be
Searching.
it could be some kind of seabird, sea ducks and things like that.
That's
Tanker lanes.
so that's like a pretty decent spot for fishing halibut out
30
there at
miles
Johnstone
east.
Point, right? People probably plug geese flying over their boat.
Yeah, well, and that's what I should say. So, like, a lot of this stuff, somebody's not like, hey, I'm going to go out here and shoot a geese. They're getting other things, like you said, they're getting halibut or something, and it's opportunistic.
Yeah, I mean, I've shot birds when I was anchored and did other things.
Oh, that
Always
area.
do.
Acreage.
You're anchored out there and 230 pounds.
I've never done that. I'm just saying I've had them come fly on my boat and volunteer for me, but
That's a suspicious one, I would say.
yeah,
Okay.
that's about the
We'll
only thing
check.
I could think about doing there. That's
Any other suspect data that we didn't talk about that you noticed along the way?
Can you
What's
clarify
the
something?
stripe thing out on Egg Island?
That's eggs. Egg search area. Mostly gullet.
Actually, they outlawed that too.
But it's
They
legal
did, but
again.
2014 they opened it, or was it 2015?
14.
14, yeah, it
Never
became
even
legal
closed
again.
it as far as I'm
And I should also say that we don't ask people, like, if people take things out of season or out of the area or whatever like that, we don't have any kind of enforcement capabilities or anything like that. So there might be areas that, hey, you're not allowed to get something there, but that's why the anonymity is so important with this data. And I'm sorry, you had a question?
I was just wondering, so I was surprised that there was such a larger, and I guess the poundage we were looking at in one of the graphs of moose over deer here. I mean, there's
The
So
moose are just
widespread
so
with
big.
deer.
It takes a lot less moose to make up that poundage than deer. So the
and
individuals,
that was a low deer year. I see.
and it was a
but
low deer
What
year.
would be more average? Like, I guess if it wasn't,
I would have to go back and check the data, but that was, when you're looking at past years, that was low. Actually, well, oh, it's not. But that was low compared to all past years. That was like the lowest
The
deer
deer?
year.
the deer was
Yeah.
lower.
Yeah, and our harvesting data reflects that, so the 2011 regulatory year, which was the year that had the big snowpocalypse, is like our highest harvest on record, and then the 2 years following that are the lowest harvest on record. And 2014 is slightly higher, but not getting much.
Yeah, I mean, we have years where that's
Well,
like
I mean,
1,300,
a lot of
I think,
guys just
like
quit
in
hawk
93 maybe or something
Uh-huh.
like that.
just to.
Yeah, so that's a pretty low number.
Yeah.
So that's an artifact of our severe winter and the deer crash. And,
Yeah.
and actually, some of our highest moose harvest, or our highest moose population, but at least on the West Delta.
Was
so-
that year?
Well, in those years and now, yeah.
Moose
So-
are just
So on the left, that's the individual animals, and on the right is poundage? Is that?
Right, yeah,
Okay.
so this is broken up by poundage, and that's by, so that's, I'm sorry, so that's why that is like, doesn't
Yeah,
match.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. It's huge.
Any others?
Well, there was your chart on berries.
Mm-hmm.
I think you said it was by pounds.
It is. It's by total weight, which they, so we ask in gallons and then they, you know,
I'd
put it
be
in.
suspicious of you being very late.
It was
No,
a
there was a couple.
banging gooseberry year.
14 was it? I got 5 gallons in the gooseberry.
I
can't believe.
Local knowledge.
Well, and you need to look at the total weight too.
You're
Those charts are,
Not that by percent.
it's by percent, but the total weight is gonna be like, so actually it's almost 30,000 pounds of berries. Oh, where did? Oh, I'm sorry, that was, I see what chart you're referring to at the very beginning. Maybe,
I've heard some stories.
maybe that chart was the most used actually, now that I think about it. Okay, you're right. I'm sorry, you guys. I totally misrepresented this chart. So that chart that I showed you is top 10 resources used. So it's most frequently used. I thought that was like, that was a lot of salmon berries. But, so that's just saying, you know, that was one of the more commonly used in households. So let me show you that chart again so you can look at it with that in mind instead of what I said. So this is all resources by weight, and as you can see, vegetation is making up not that much. And this is top used by households.
So you're saying that's most common?
Yeah, most
Most commonly used.
That still doesn't sound right for lagoons. Because low bush cranberries are easier to find than lagoons.
Oh, way more people go for lagoons. People
Yeah,
don't
Well,
like
and I
lagoons that
think
much.
people weren't having
I walk past
that much success with the low bush cranberries. They said nangoons and blueberries were really, really good that year, but
Not
not.
gonna be for a lot of things.
Some lady was saying, you know, she always goes to this place for blueberries, and there's low bush cranberries in that area too, and she didn't have any there this time.
That's because people are picking them too early.
Any others? So this report will be up online hopefully in like maybe July. Sounds about right. And it won't, Cordova's just a chapter, so the other communities will be in there. And then there's also specific discussions about EVOS impacts. That'll be an introduction and a conclusion if you guys are interested. It'll be at our website. If you go to the Department of Fish and Game website and you click on the publications link, there's one under there for subsistence technical papers, and that will be there, and as well as the older ones. And we also have this database called CSIS database, where it has all of the poundage data for every year that we've done a study in that community. And there's also now, we have an interactive map face, which is pretty cool. And you can, there's little circles for each community, and they're different colors depending on how recent the study was done, what types of study was done. So we did here was a comprehensive survey, but these aren't the types of surveys we always do all the time. Sometimes we just do salmon, sometimes we just do marine mammals, sometimes we just do caribou things. So it'll tell you what kind of studies are associated with those communities. So it's a really good resource if you guys are interested.
We'll also send some physical copies to the community, probably library, school, Fish and Game, different places that you might be able to access them.
And if anybody wants a copy of the PowerPoint, let me know. We have a couple, we brought a couple of hard copies, but I can also give you a digital copy. You need to look at it more closely and let us.
And we will incorporate all these notes, what I heard today in the room, into the text of the chapter.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you guys
Letting
so
us
much.
put an
guys.
exercise.